Rutherford, does anybody know who Samuel Rutherford was? Excellent again, just making up stuff right and left. Okay, so Samuel Rutherford, his dates are 1600 to 1661. He was a Scottish Presbyterian minister and a nonconformist. When I say nonconformist, does anybody know what that means? No? Okay, so a nonconformist would be somebody that is opposed to certain practices of the Church of England. So very popular ones to be opposed to would be things like using the Book of Common Prayer, also the structure of the church. Church of England is an episcopal structure. Nonconformists would speak out against that, and we're advocating, in Rutherford's case, a Presbyterian structure. He was rather outspoken in his views, and he was sent from his town where he was a pastor in Anworth, Scotland, and he was exiled somewhat to Aberdeen in 1636. If you look at his Wikipedia page, it will say that he was banished to Aberdeen due to his writings against Arminianism. I don't know a lot about Rutherford, so before I read this book, I would not have been raising my hand when I was asking you those questions either. I tried to find some other source other than Wikipedia to see if that was true, and I couldn't actually find any kind of confirmation. More reliable sources just say it was because he irritated people in power by his nonconformist views. In any case, he gets to Aberdeen and he meets a very cold reception. The ministers there do not like him, apparently. He is not allowed to preach. And he is in Aberdeen until 1638, so 2 years. 36 to 38, that is when the majority of his letters in this book are written. There are some before and some after, but the bulk are during that period of time. In 1643, he became a commissioner to the a commissioner of the Church of Scotland to the Westminster Assembly. Does anybody know why that would be relevant for us as Orthodox Presbyterians? Yeah. Yeah. So, yes. So, what did they do?
They gathered to write the Westminster Confession.
Okay, great. And that's the document we use? Yes, it's a document we use with some minor revisions. So there's an American version that was revised in the 18th century, that we hold to. But this is essentially the document that our church uses as a confession. Rutherford is known for two books primarily. One is what we're going to be talking about tonight, the Letters of Samuel Rutherford. The other is Lex Rex. David Scheck-Snyder really likes this book. I have not read it, but it is a work of political theology. Is that a fair description of it?
It is, and it's great.
And he really likes it. So if you're looking for political theology, check out Lex Rex. All right. Now, I'm going to move this down. So I don't know how I have to stop volunteering to do the books that are just collections of letters. So I did screw tape letters a while back. And I didn't learn my lesson because as I was going through this, I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot. It's difficult to structure a bunch of letters into a class. But what I've tried to do is pick out three major themes. I'm sure there's a lot more themes you could identify if you're reading through this book, but these are the ones that immediately jumped out at me. So first one is death. I had a more humorous opening for this, but given the events of today, I felt it wasn't appropriate to go the humorous route. So, death. Death is everywhere in these letters, everywhere. He writes many letters to a lady, Kenmure. She was a patron of Scottish ministers. And she had a very difficult life. She was in ill health throughout her life. She lost 2 infant daughters, 2 husbands, and 1 4-year-old son. And at least 2 of the letters, maybe more, to her are on occasion of those deaths. Rutherford himself is experiencing a lot of trials and tribulations, including death. One of the letters he writes to Kenmure on, I think, the occasion of one of her husband's deaths, he adds at the end, almost kind of as a P.S., it's kind of like a by the way, oh, my wife died recently after being sick for a year and a half. And that's not to imply that he's being uncaring about his wife's death, but it's just kind of tucked away at the end of the letter. And I think it just shows like how much of this is going on, right? If my wife dies, I can pretty much guarantee it's going to be headline news for all I talk about for many months at a time, if not longer. I was reading this book, or reading, it was either an article or a sermon by Spurgeon, where he was talking about how Christians approach death. And he says, even in his time, and this is the 19th century, that people don't like to think about death. They want to push it away. And you can almost just imagine, consider just from the 19th century to now how much more we do that. We don't like to think about death. I work in healthcare, and I haven't seen a lot of death just by the nature of the type of healthcare I do. But I can tell you from what I have seen, it's very clear that people in general are not prepared to die, and people are not prepared to watch their loved ones die. So it's not uncommon for patients to be very clearly at the end of life, and doctors sitting down with their family and saying, she is going to die. He is going to die. There's nothing we can do to prevent this. We can prolong it, but we can't prevent it. And for families to want to prolong it, right? They're unable to bring themselves to the point where they say, okay, we're done, let's let her go. I think it's probably appropriate that we're doing this topic on the eve of 9/11. Who remembers 9/11? This is a little bit off topic. Yeah, so I cannot express to you how old it makes me feel when I encounter adults that have no memory of 9/11. And for those of you who are in the room that don't remember, the only thing I can say, it's going to be strange to you when you start meeting adults that don't remember COVID. That's kind of what it's like. I've been thinking a lot about 9/11 this year. I'm not quite sure why, but I have been. I recently watched a documentary on Disney Plus from National Geographic. It's called 9/11 One Day in America. It's stunning. I highly recommend it. There is profanity in it, so you might want to be aware of that. But it's composed of interviews from people that survived that day and from video footage that was taken during the attacks. And one thread that seems to pop up a couple times in that documentary series is people saying they thought it was the end of the world. So there's a very moving account of an Irish man who was in one of the towers for a business meeting, and the towers hit. As he tries to get out, he encounters a badly burned woman, and he's able to get her out eventually and hand her off to paramedics. And he reports saying like, oh, I thought at that moment like, okay, it's done. Like I'm out of it, it's done. And then he gets a phone call from his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law says, do you know where your sister is? And his sister and his niece were on the plane that hit his building. And he says, at that moment, my whole world changed forever. There's a firefighter that talks about how he survives the collapse and gets out of the rubble, and he says it's just ash and silence and flames when he's walking out into that rubble. And he says, I really thought, this is the end of the world. This has to be the end of the world. We don't expect the world to end. We don't expect our worlds to end. Beyond just the actual death of 9/11, which is horrific in and of itself, it was a violent reminder that the world is passing away. Those towers were so iconic, although now I was thinking about this, they weren't up for that long. They were only there for about 30 years. I mean, it's almost been gone as long as they were there, but they were so iconic. They look so strong, and yet the things that we think are permanent, are strong, they can just be gone in a moment. So, how do we face death? The first point, how do we face death as Christians, is know we are not alone. I'm going to be reading a lot of quotes from the letters tonight. Rutherford writes, and he does speak in 16th century English, so you just have to kind of manage that. But now I believe ye have only these two shallow brooks, sickness and death, to pass through. And ye have also a promise that Christ shall do more than meet you, even that he shall come himself and go with you foot by foot, yea, and bear you in his arms. I think one of the terrifying things about death is the idea of being utterly alone, right? And you'll find that in different, it seems to be very popular in songs or pop culture where everyone dies alone. That refrain comes up a lot. The Christian doesn't die alone. The Lord is with us even through this difficult time. I want to read a larger section here, actually from the Pilgrim's Progress. So if you've read Pilgrim's Progress, you'll remember that at the end, Pilgrim and Hopeful are about to cross over the river, which symbolizes death, and go into the heavenly city. Then they addressed themselves to the water, and entering, Christian began to sink. And crying out to his good friend Hopeful, he said, I sink in deep waters, the billows go over my head, all his waves go over me. Then said the other, be of good cheer, my brother, I feel the bottom, and it is good. And then said Christian, ah, my friend, the sorrows of death have compassed me about. I shall not see the land that flows with milk and honey. And with that, a great darkness and horror fell upon Christian, so that he could not see before him. Also, here he in great measure lost his senses, so that he could neither remember nor orderly talk of any of those sweet refreshments that he had met with in his way of his pilgrimage. But all the words that he spake still tended to discover that he had horror of mind and hearty fears that he should die in that river and never obtain entrance in the gate. Here also, as they stood by and perceived, he was in much troublesome thoughts of the sins that he had committed, both since and before he began to be a pilgrim. 'Twas also observed that he was troubled with apparitions of hobgoblins and evil spirits, for ever and anon he would intimate so much by words. Hopeful, therefore, here had much ado to keep his brother's head above water. Yea, sometimes he would be quite gone down, and ere a while he would rise up again half dead. Hopeful would then endeavor to comfort him, saying, Brother, I see the gate and the men standing by to receive us. But Christian would answer, 'tis you they wait for. You have been hopeful ever since I knew you. And so have you, he said to Christian. Ah, brother, he said, surely if I was right, he would now arise to help me, but for my sins he hath brought me into the snare and hath let me. Then said Hopeful, my brother, you have quite forgotten the text where it says of the wicked, there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm, and they are not troubled as other men are, neither are they plagued like other men. These troubles and distresses you go through in these waters are no sign that God has forsaken you, but they are sent to try you, whether you will call to mind which heretofore you have received his goodness and live upon him in your distresses. A Christian is ultimately brought through the river into the heavenly city, even though he experiences a very painful death. I recall Pastor Babcock over at Calvin OPC one time saying, and I don't remember the context, but he just said, sometimes people just don't die well. And that's true, right? Even in cases like Christian, where we come to an end that is very difficult. Even when we come to an end in which we are not doing well, we are still not left alone. We are still with Christ. And even though great fears may come upon us, we're still called to look with the eyes of faith to the Lord and look to his promises. And he is faithful to carry us through. In one of the letters that Rutherford writes, he's writing to a man who survived a storm in a boat. It's kind of a crazy story because he was going to check on another boat that they thought had been attacked by pirates. I'm not exactly sure the details, but big storm comes in. People thought he died. Turns out he ultimately landed on another part of the coast and made his way back home. And there, Rutherford writes, "The Lord knew ye had forgotten something that was necessary for your journey, that your armor was not yet as thick enough against the stroke of death. Now, in the strength of Jesus, dispatch your business. That debt is not forgiven, but fristed," which means, I guess, looking it up, delayed. "Death has not bidden you farewell, but has only left you for a short season. End your journey ere the night come upon you. Have all the readiness against the time that ye must sail through that black impetuous Jordan. And Jesus, who knoweth both those depths and the rocks and all the coasts, be your pilot." So two things going on here. Again, Rutherford's pointing out that it's Christ who guides us through those, as he says, impetuous waters. He's our pilot. He'll bring us through. But also there's a notion of preparing for death, right? That he encourages the man to get his things in order. I think he's probably talking about spiritual things, but there's also a sense in which we should have material things in order and ready to go. There are things that can be done and should be done, right? Just in terms of practical considerations for the people left behind. You should, if you have a family and you don't have a life insurance policy, you should probably get a life insurance policy. If you don't have a will, you should probably get a will done. If you have kids, you should probably have serious conversations about who are going to take those kids if the worst, I shouldn't say the worst, if death comes, right? So those are practical things that we should not turn away from because we don't like the topic of death, but rather we should understand that we still have a duty to care for and love the people that will still be here when we are gone. Rutherford talks about how we should remember that Christ purposes death for our good and is in control of death. And I think one of the scariest things about death is this idea that it's like this meteorite or something that just comes out of left field, and God is sitting there and going, I gotta do something about this. I don't mean to be impious in saying it that way. That's not how God reacts, obviously. The Lord is in fact in control of death. It doesn't catch him off guard. He's not wondering, well, do I let this go through or do I not let this go through? No, he's in control of all things. And when it comes our time to die, which has been determined from all eternity by him, he is in control of that. I confess it seems strange to me that your Lord, excuse me, so I want to give a little more background here. So he's writing again to Lady Kenmure on the death of her 4-year-old son. And even though, as we've talked about already, death is quite common back then, it seems a lot, even for even for Rutherford, this seems to be a lot that she's experiencing. I confess it seems strange to me that your Lord should have done which seemed to ding out the bottom of your worldly comforts. But we see not the ground of the Almighty's sovereignty. He goeth by our right hand and by our left hand, and we see him not. We see but pieces of the broken links of this chain of his providence, and he coggeth the wheels of his own providence, and we see it not. Do not wonder to see the judge of the world weave into one web your mercies and the judgments of the house of Kenmure. He can make one web of contraries. He is working, even if we don't understand why we go through, and this is going to be talked more about in the next section, why we go through suffering or why death comes, the Lord has a purpose in it. I corrected myself earlier when I said the worst comes, because there are far worse things than death, right? I would much rather die than, sin in some horrible way. I would much rather die than turn away from the Lord. It is not the worst thing. And we trust that the Lord knows what is best for us at all times. So the second topic, suffering. It's just one feel-good topic after another in these letters. Suffering. What's the point of suffering? What do you guys think? Yeah.
Suffering tends to get our attention more than other things. God tends to for sanctification.
Yeah. So you said, Alexander said, it gets our attention often more than other things, and God uses it for our sanctification. Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. Any other thoughts? Sometimes we don't know exactly why we're suffering, right? Sometimes you can look backwards on providence and see how the Lord has structured things and used things to help us in our sanctification in particular ways, or moved our lives along in certain ways that we couldn't have seen at the time. Sometimes I think it's mysterious even looking back on it. And this is what Rutherford says: we may indeed think, cannot God bring us to heaven with ease and prosperity? Who doubteth but he can? But his infinite wisdom thinketh and decreeth the contrary, and we cannot see a reason for it. Yet he hath a most just reason. We never with our eyes saw our own soul, yet we have a soul. We see many rivers, but we do not know their first spring and original fountain, yet they have a beginning. So he's saying we see a lot of things that we don't understand completely in one way or another, right? We might not, I'm sure Lady Kenmore, after she was on the 5th death of a family member, the 3rd death of a child, didn't completely understand it, right? I was thinking of John Owen, who was another Puritan who lost 11 children. Most of those were in childhood. I think one survived to adulthood and then died. He outlived all of them, though. Yeah, those, I can't imagine how difficult those circumstances are. And even then, we look to the Lord and say, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, blessed be the Lord. And he is working even those circumstances for our good. Rutherford says that suffering draws us away from the things of the world and sanctifies us, as we mentioned. And I dare say that God's hammering of you from your youth is only to make you a fair carved stone in the high upper temple of the New Jerusalem. Not an uncommon notion for Christians, that suffering brings us closer to God. And it is legitimate and it is good for us to look past our sufferings to the joy that awaits us. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Even knowing all this doesn't necessarily make suffering easy. Rutherford talks about how prior to suffering, and in his case, his suffering is largely due to the fact that he is away from his home, that he is prevented from preaching. He calls it his dumb Sabbaths because he can't preach on Sunday. It is the cold reception he gets from everybody around him. That's his suffering, right? But suffering can take different forms, right? James talks about how count it all joy when you experience various trials, right? And those various trials is really, it kind of opens it up, right? It might be physical suffering, it might be economic suffering, it might be emotional pain, it might be intellectual suffering. It can all can be brought into these categories. But in any case, Rutherford, I kind of got a little off my track there. Rutherford talks about how he thought it was going to be really easy to handle this kind of suffering. And then he says, like a fool, I believed under suffering for Christ that I myself should keep the key of Christ's treasures, take out comforts when I listed, and eat and be fat. So he's like, I thought even when I was suffering, it was still going to be easy. I could still take out the treasuries of Christ, he says, and feel okay. But I see now a sufferer for Christ will be made to know himself, and will be holden at the door as well as another poor sinner, and will be fain to eat with the bairns, which also had to look up, it means children. I'll be happy to eat with the children or get whatever little I get, and to take to the byboard, I don't know what that means, and be glad to do so. So whatever it means, you can kind of get the gist of it from the context. The point here, I think, is don't overestimate your own strength, right? Don't think I can white knuckle this. I am able to do this on my own. I have the spiritual resources to manage this. Rather, look to the Lord to provide you what you need to weather the storm. Look to your fellow Christians to help you. Don't become insular when you go into suffering, because that's an easy thing to do. I kind of jumped around, as I said. Going back to his particular suffering, as I mentioned, people didn't really like him in Aberdeen, and he says, "Many think me a strange man, and my cause not good. But I care not much for man's thoughts or approbation. I think no shame of the cross." So it can be a very great temptation for us to want to be thought well of by others. Now, as opposed to thinking that's something that could potentially be avoided, right? If I navigate this situation good, I'll probably be able to get through it and people will still think pretty good of me, right? That's not the way and I do tend to think that sometimes, and that's not the way I should think about it. Rather, I think that I should think about it how the apostles rejoiced in Acts when they were counted worthy to be persecuted for Christ, right? It goes against kind of our natural grain, and it's something we should really contemplate, something we should really think about and really pray about and be prepared for mentally and spiritually and emotionally when that time comes. As we mentioned, suffering points us away from the world and towards the loveliness of Christ, looking past the suffering and to the joy of the Lord. Ye shall find it your only happiness, under whatsoever thing disturbeth and crosseth the peace of your mind in this life, to love nothing of itself, but only God for himself. Our love to him should not begin on earth as it shall be in heaven. For the bride taketh not by 1,000 degrees so much delight in her wedding garments as she does in her bridegroom. So we, in the life to come, howbeit clothed with glory as with a robe, shall not be so much affected with the glory that goeth about us, as with the bridegroom's joyful face and presence. Madam, if you can win to this here, the field is won. I think that's right. I think if we can grasp that truth and cling to that, then the field is won, right? Everything else pales in comparison with the joy of the Lord. This is a little bit off track, maybe not too off track, but it did get me thinking about something that C.S. Lewis talked about a lot. Again, to repeat, a lot of issues with C.S. Lewis, a lot of concerns about C.S. Lewis's theology. But one thing I think he did get right was his talk of, he calls it joy. There's a German word for it, I will probably butcher it, but it's called Sehnsucht, which is an unrequited longing. Lewis, in particular, uses nostalgia as an example, but he gives things like, kind of a longing that you might encounter when you see something of great beauty, like a sunset or a piece of music or a painting. But nostalgia is a good example. Now, he talks about how if you go back in time, you would feel just as you do now, right? You have this nostalgic view that there's almost this perfectness or this joy somewhere in the past, and you want to get back there. But if you actually went back in time, it wouldn't be there. There might be very nice things, but it wouldn't satisfy that longing. And Lewis's point is that there are things in the world that are signposts, right, pointing towards the joy and the beauty that are ultimately found in God alone. right? And I think that's accurate. And I think Rutherford kind of touches on that when he talks about not loving things for themselves, right? We can love the good things that the Lord gives us, but that needs to be kept in perspective. And the goodness that are in those things are really ultimately just a pale reflection of the goodness that is found in the Lord and the joy that is at his right hand forevermore. Sometimes Rutherford does mention the comfort he receives from the Lord, but he also makes it clear that it's not something he continually experiences throughout his trials. So some have written to me that I am possibly too joyful at the cross, but my joy overleapeth the cross. It is bounded and terminated upon Christ. I know that the sun will overcloud and eclipse, and that I shall again be put to walk in the shadow. But Christ must be welcome to come and go, as he thinketh meet. I hope, when a change cometh, to cast anchor at midnight upon the rock, which he has taught me to know in this daylight, whither I may run when I must say my lesson without book and believe in the dark. I am sure it is sin to tarrow at Christ's good meat, and not to eat when he saith, Eat, O well-beloved, and drink abundantly. If he bear me on his back and carry me in his arms over this water, I hope for grace to set down my feet on dry ground when the way is better. Okay, so he has relief from the Lord during these trials, but it's not like a continuous thing. But he takes great joy in it when it comes, and that's appropriate, that's good. And it's okay when we're going through those difficulties if you don't feel that way, it's okay to feel bad, I guess is a way of saying it. And knowing that that badness is not always going to be there. You will get through the night. Christ will take you through the night and bring you once again to the morning. It's okay to enjoy the morning when it's there. Let me pause there before I go on to the final topic. Any comments or questions? Third topic is exhort. Yeah.
So when I think about death, I looked up Christ and I noticed that he was like he was running to it. So I'm just wondering if God was writing anything scripturally to support his point about not being alone.
Sorry, I don't understand. Could you just repeat it? I don't think I'm understanding the question.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
When I think about Christ walking in the Garden of Gethsemane, and going towards death here, there's a fear there.
Yeah.
So my point here, it looks like he was alone to me. I'm just saying that's a casual observation here. Where do you get the support for not being alone on Pilgrim's Progress or something else? Where do the scriptures make that point?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I didn't really look for scriptural backing for it. Probably should have. I think that there are certain verses that lend themselves to that. So when Christ is talking about, he's giving the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, and he talks about how the angels actually bring Lazarus to Abraham's bosom. Now it's a parable, right? And you can kind of press things in parables too far, but there's a sense that he's not left alone. The angels actually bring him to heaven. Yeah, please. Yeah. Is there a particular verse that you think would kind of be? Oh yeah. Well, why did you ask? You knew the answer already. I don't know why you. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. No, that's an excellent verse. Yeah. Thank you. That's excellent. Any other comments or questions? Yeah. 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 Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Doug, did you have a? Psalm, when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are near me. Yeah, yeah. Great. Further comments and questions? Okay. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that Jesus experienced death differently than we're going to experience it?
David, do you want to take this one?
I will not experience the full wrath of God when I die. I think it's a really good question. I didn't mean that glibly. Like,
yeah, I mean, Christ is right. I mean, Christ is undergoing redemptive work, which we obviously do not undergo when we die. I think that is a critical difference. I mean, I guess I'd really have to think about it if I tried to like bullet point all the differences, but just off the top of my head, yeah, there's a very big difference between what Christ is going through at his death and what we experience.
do you think that might have been part of the experience?
I'd probably want to think about it a little bit more honestly before I answer. Just what? Yeah. Yeah, it's a great statement. Yeah, he said, you know, he is the first, for those who didn't hear, he is the first fruits. He's with us because he's already walked through it. Yeah. Did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I mean, also on top of like how he died on the cross, how he needed to suffer even physically on the cross, how much suffering, like even if you personally were crucified on the cross, how much pain and suffering that brings to a human being. It's unbearable. On top of even more the wrath of God.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Christ is going. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's the physical pain, obviously, but there's also the pain of having God's wrath poured out. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, good thoughts, good questions. Any others? Okay. Third topic, third and final one, is exhortation and caring for one another. So in the midst of all the difficulties Rutherford is going through, hello. Oh, okay, do you want to sit here for a minute? And I'll be done in a minute. Okay. In the midst of all the difficulties that Rutherford is going through, he attempts to still care for former congregants. Don't look at her, I'm the cuter one. So, for example, he's encouraging. He encourages an Irish captain in the Scottish Army about the state of the Irish church. As for our lovely and beloved church in Ireland, my heart bleedeth for her desolation. But I believe that our Lord is only lopping the vine trees, but not intending to cut them down or root them out. It is but folly to measure the gospel by summer or winter weather. The summer sun of the saints shineth not in them in this life. How should we have complained if the Lord had turned the same providence that we now stomach at upside down, and he had ordered matters thus? That first the saints should have enjoyed heaven, glory, and ease, and then Methuselah's days of sorrow and daily miseries. We would think a short heaven, no heaven. Certainly his ways past finding out. So again, easy, and this kind of ties back into what I was saying, easy for us to turn inward on the difficulties we experience, but even in the midst of troubles, our lives still belong to Christ, and he would still have us care for the people around us. So don't let the trials of your life, whether it's something as big as death or suffering or lesser trials, don't let those trials pull your eyes off of what the Lord would have us do. He also does some rebuking of congregants. I'm going to read the summaries of these letters that the editor put in. So one is to John Gordon the elder. He was I'm quoting here, was a very difficult parishioner and a man of strong passions. His estate was heavily burdened by debt. Part of the purpose of this letter is a protest against the attempt to meet his debts by an inequitable raising of the rents of the farms and cottages of the estate. And here's what Rutherford writes. Ye are in my heart in the night watches. Ye are my joy and crown in the day of Christ. O Lord, bear me witness. If my soul thirsteth for anything out of heaven more than for your salvation. Love heaven, let your heart be on it, it were time that your soul cast itself and all your burdens upon Christ. I beseech you by the wounds of your Redeemer and by your compeurience before him, and by the salvation of your soul, lose no more time. Run fast, for it is late. Ye are now upon the very border of the other life. Your Lord cannot be blamed for not giving you warning. I have taught the truth of Christ to you and delivered unto you the whole counsel of God, and I have stood before the Lord for you, and I will yet still stand. What strikes you about that rebuke? Yeah, it's very gentle, really. So I think it comes from a place which seems to be of genuine concern. Easy for us to say our actions are coming from a place of love, right? People can do horrible things to one another and say, well, I'm ultimately doing it for their good. I'm doing it because I love them. But they're being harsh, right? They're not being gentle as we're told to be in scriptures. Doesn't mean we ignore sin, but it does mean we approach the issue in genuine love and in genuine concern. He incidentally, it's kind of odd, he writes to that guy's son who is apparently kind of living in ways that are not too good. I'm not going to read into that, but it is interesting, I guess, and he is, I think, a little bit more strong in that letter, but still, I think the principles apply. He writes to someone about what the marks of a Christian are. So he reminds them, this is what Christian life looks like. Ye may put a difference betwixt you and the reprobates if you have these marks. 1, if ye prize Christ and his truth, so as ye will sell all and buy him and suffer for it. 2, if the love of Christ keepeth you back from sinning, more than the law or fear of hell. 3, if ye be humble and deny your own will, wit, credit, ease, honor, the world, vanity, and glory of it. 4, your profession must not be barren or void of good works. 5, ye must in all things aim at God's honor, and ye must eat, drink, sleep, buy, sell, sit, stand, pray, read, and hear the word with a heart purposed that God may be honored. Ye must show yourself an enemy to sin, and reprove the works of darkness, such as drunkenness, swearing, and lying. Albeit the company should hate you for doing so. Keep in mind the truth of God that ye heard me teach, and have nothing to do with the corruptions and new guises entering into the house of God. 8, make conscience your calling in covenants in buying and selling. 9, acquaint yourself with daily prayer. There's a lot of great stuff there. I think you could probably do a class just on those sections and kind of walking through those various marks. Yet at the same time, I think you can read that and think, oh man, like I am not doing all of that, and get a little worried. At the same time, he also writes at one point, be not afraid for little grace. Christ soweth his living seed, and he will not lose his seed. If he have the guiding of my flock and state, it shall not miscarry. Our spilled works, losses, deadness, coldness, wretchedness are the ground upon which the good husbandman laboreth. Even when we are of small faith, that is still faith, right? Like the seed of a mustard seed, or the size of a mustard seed. And we can pray that the Lord grows us and strengthens us, and that the marks of a Christian that we read in the previous quote become more and more evident in our lives, and he is faithful to do those things. So that brings me to the end of the letters of Samuel Rutherford. We have a few minutes left before 7:30. Any other comments or questions that you guys want to bring forward? Yes?
What was the weirdest Scottish word you found while you were reading?
The bairns for children. I'm like, what is a bairns? Yeah, bairns, I think. Yeah. I never figured out what the byboard was. Yeah, there's some weird Scottish words in there. Well, if nothing else, thank you guys for coming, and we are finished.